Okay. Right. Kia ora tātou. Pauhihiri, paurarama, pau te whakaro, pau te tangata, pau te aroha, te pauahiri nei a tātou, morioro ki a tātou, au mea hui e tāiki. Welcome everyone to this morning here in New Zealand, but this session as a part of the Productive Ocean Satellite event for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. This is the session on Indigenous-led science collaborations toward a productive ocean, really providing an outline of some examples of projects happening here in New Zealand or Aotearoa. The format for the session this morning is we have three sets of speakers. There'll be about 15 minutes talking about their projects. There'll be a chance for some questions straight afterwards, and then a sort of an extended time at the end for a discussion with the panel. So feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along, or put up your hand if you would like to ask it in person. We are dispersed across Aotearoa in different places, and so it'd be great if people can just keep their videos off unless they're speaking, just to make sure that everyone can have their I guess the right sort of power to get their message across as well. So just to start off, the other thing, I think I'll let people do introductions as they're starting their sessions, and if you have a question, it'd be great if you can just give your name and where you're coming in from too at that point. Ko mā tātua te waka, ko whakatohia te iwi, ko Māui Hudson tuku ingoa, kei te whare wānanga Waikato hau e mahi ana. So just by way of a quick introduction, my name is Māui Hudson. I affiliate with Whakatohia, which is an iwi here in Aotearoa, and I work at the University of Waikato in the Te Kotai Research Institute. So the first speakers for the session this morning, Danny Paruru from the Whakatohia Māori Trust Board, and Kimberly Maxwell from the Te Kotai Research Institute. So hand over to you two. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Māui. Kia ora, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to watch our presentation today. So, ko waio, ko Danny Paruru tōku ingoa. My name is Danny Paruru. I am from the Whakatohia tribe in the Eastern Bay of Plenty of New Zealand. And today I'm going to share with you a little bit of a story about our aquaculture journey for our tribe, Whakatohia, that is started, I guess, 30 odd years ago. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so this title of presentation is called the Whakatohia Aquaculture Story, and I'll be sharing the second half.
Danny, you froze.
Might be the PowerPoint, Māui.
Yeah, I see he's frozen as well.
Mm.
All right, let's just go. Okay, a chance to jump back on. Here we go. You're on mute, Danny.
Sorry, did you hear that, Mo?
No.
Okay, sorry, let's start again. Just starting off my presentation. Yeah, sorry, this is our story about Whakatohe's aquaculture vision, I guess. So what I was started to talk about was our vision, ko te kaihoki i Waiawa, to be the food bowl that feeds the world. And to be the food bowl that feeds the world, I guess to us, the food isn't just about providing food to the world, but it's also about our culture and our heritage, and our knowledge that we have as a tribe to share with the world as well.
Are you going to try and share your slides again, or are you going to just...
Apologies. There we go. Sorry, I'm not sure what you missed from me talking when it cut off.
Yeah, right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning, okay. Right, you can see the slides now, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, if you missed my introduction, apologies for that. This is a quick presentation around our tribal aquaculture story. This is a journey that we've been on for about 30 years as a tribe, to try and regain our prosperity, having lost, I guess, a lot of our prosperity during the land confiscations in the 1860s. And I was just talking about the vision, ko te kaihoki i Waiawa, to be the food bowl that feeds the world. And as I mentioned, hopefully you heard it, but this is an opportunity for us to ensure that we can survive, I guess, from the land, from the ocean, from the environment that we have around us. So as I was talking, and you probably missed the slides, but this is one of our main objectives, or our main goals, is kia pū mai ki tō tātou whakatōhiatanga, which is to hold strong to everything that is whakatōhia. One of the things that happened to whakatōhia, as many tribes had experienced around the world, was that we'd lost our land through confiscations, and with it went our prosperity. So being considered a landless people, many years ago, our kaumātua got together to consider whether the moana, the ocean, could help to reestablish our prosperity. But we also wanted to find out if our cultural knowledge was still there. What do we know about the history, our association to the ocean that was handed down through generations? And how can we ensure that our mātauranga, our traditions, our knowledge is acknowledged and can help with customary and commercial decision-making around our ocean? So we have some big picture priorities. First of all, we want to grow our people. We want to provide education and training to our people in Opotiki, our location here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, through different methods. I guess trade training was going to be an important factor for us. What trades and skills can we provide to our people? We also have pre-trade training for our local people here. Many of our people don't have any qualifications, and many have also been on the benefit for many years. And so we offer at this point in time an opportunity for them to go through pre-trade training and other workforce development opportunities, which we're starting to get into now. But in terms of the economy, we're looking at many factors. The first thing, I guess, is having open ocean water space to be available for a commercial development. Over the past few years, our main focus has been to support the development of a mussel farm here in Opotiki and the open ocean. So it's the first open ocean mussel farm in New Zealand. And of course, over the past couple of years, we've been very fortunate to have the support of many people to develop a mussel factory, which opened last year. The development of the new Opotiki Harbour, and of course, future planning around an Opotiki Industrial Harbour Precinct. This slide just gives you an idea of the journey that we've been on right from the beginning as a tribe. So back in 1996, our kaumatua, that's our elders, our iwi elders got together to put forward their ideas and their aspirations around growing a local economy based on open ocean aquaculture. And of course, the mussel farming idea was thought of many years ago. So I just wanted to share this slide to show the process that was undertaken, some of the challenges that we're having to overcome, I guess, as a tribe, but also as a community, to eventually get to 2022, where we have a functioning mussel farm, 3,800 hectares of water space, which is currently being developed by a separate company called Whakatohea Mussels Opotiki Limited. And of course, last year, we were also fortunate as a community to have opened the Whakatohea Mussels processing factory here in Opotiki. One of the things that was really important for us as a team was to look at the technology, excuse me, for open ocean mussel farming. This picture just gives you an idea of some of the technological challenges that were thought of to withstand, I guess, the currents and the winds for managing a farm in the open ocean. And as you can see, the boat there is one of the barges, excuse me, that was purchased by the company several years ago. The idea, I guess, of creating a local industry for mussel farming, of course, had to be supported by not only the iwi, the local tribe, but it came together with many different people to create a very unique community project and a community company. So Opotiki, the Whakatohea Mussels Opotiki Limited has been supported by all of these different groups of people. So both Māori and Pākehā individuals and whānau, so their family trusts as well that have invested into the company, different land blocks across the region, private trusts, our marae committees have also invested into the company. We also have, opened up the opportunity for individual mums and dads to participate in the investments as well as other companies. As I mentioned before, the Whakatohea Mussels processing factory was opened last year. This is an earlier image of the factory before it was completed. And I believe that Peter Vitasevich, the CEO, mentioned that there were about 187 staff currently employed within the factory, but also working on the mussel barges. So that's an incredible increase of employment opportunities for our little community here. This picture is of the recent harbour development project. So one thing that was really important to the success of this project was to open up the harbour entrance to allow for an all-weather access to the harbour. So this will be completed at the end of 2023. Those breakwater structures there are about 450 metres long. Once they're completed, then the entrance into the harbour will be opened to allow for the mussel barges and other commercial and private boats to be entering into the harbour. Whakatohea, along with all of its partners, have created this strategy around aquaculture development. So there are a number of key things that were really important, but building capacity was the first thing. Again, as from Whakatohea, we're very fortunate to have many skilled and qualified people who have contributed to the success, I guess, so far of the development of the aquaculture industry here in Opotiki. We've also looking at training our people right from early childhood education right through to adult education in different areas to support the growing industries. There are other groups like Hawthorne Institute who are looking at developing other species and the opportunities for aquaculture for those species. Fundamentally for me though, I think it's looking at understanding our environment and biology and making sure that we can protect and support the growing industries, but making sure that we can make sure that those things are sustainable going into the future. And just to finish off, there are many other opportunities that Whakatohera and our neighbouring iwi are looking at in terms of open ocean farming or aquaculture, also inshore aquaculture projects that could potentially help grow and support our local communities. We're also in discussions around the possibilities of flounder as a potential inshore aquaculture project, and there are many other sorts of things that are growing in development at this stage. And that's my presentation, and I'll hand it over to Kimberly. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Danny. How does that look?
Fine.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tātou kua hui hui mai I tēnei ata rorohiko. Welcome everyone this morning that's joined us online. I'm very privileged to be affiliated to the tribes listed here and to be able to speak to you all today on this topic, Indigenous-led science collaborations toward a productive ocean. I am a Māori marine researcher and have been working in this space for 20 years, and today am going to share some of the experiences through He Papa Moana, which is part of the Moana project, which I'm working on at the moment. And I wouldn't be able to do any of it without any of my tribes. I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors, and they have supported me to get to where I am today. So I wouldn't be doing any of this without our amazing visionary leaders that we have back home in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. So a bit of background to the work I'm doing. I'm helping support Whakatohea with our aspirations through developing a plan and an iwi assessment framework. And as Danny mentioned, in our Treaty of Waitangi grievance settlement, we have a Moana focus because a lot of our lands can't come back to us. And I was tasked by Ropu Awhina to develop a plan so that as we're growing, we're keeping ourselves in check to our responsibilities as the tangata whenua, the local people of our area. And while I was starting to work on the plan, the Moana project team were developing their proposal and wanted to ensure that the research they were conducting was of direct benefit to New Zealand, and particularly the mussel farm. So to work together, collaborate together, Whakatohea came on board the Moana project as an iwi research partner, and we also represent a case study of a nation within a nation. So Whakatohea have diverse interests in the marine space, as Danny's just shared, and so we become a good example of how the science in the Moana project can then be applied in the real world outside of science through Whakatohea wanting to achieve our aspirations. A little bit about the Moana project. So the overall aim is to improve our ocean forecasting for New Zealand's marine economy. And we're sort of structured into 4 research groups. And all of these groups have research that overlaps and feeds into another group's work. And we have names that reflect components of the ocean. And in the centre here, we have He Papa Moana, which is can be it's a metaphor, but it's also, yeah, it's a metaphor and it's a description. So he papa moana is to represent the seabed, the ocean floor. And that's our foundational ocean knowledge that we have, that we bring to the project as Māori through our mātauranga Māori, our Māori knowledge and knowledge system, which is the ocean knowledge that we have that predates scientific research within New Zealand. So it's that foundational knowledge that we have around New Zealand's moana. And then we also, he papa moana is a metaphor for an ocean knowledge exchange platform. So we have knowledge from all the other components of the project coming into the he papa, achieving the he papa moana outcomes, and also going out into the other research aims. And that platform is to understand impacts on iwi interests, in particular marine heat waves and marine species connectivity, and understanding the ocean currents in New Zealand. And we have in the picture there our waka haurua. So they become also a platform for sharing that ocean knowledge as they conduct their voyages around New Zealand and share their learnings that they have while they're out on the waka. Coming into the Moana project, I've been working on the Sustainable Seas National Science Challenge, looking at how Māori value the marine environment, and developing a co-management framework for ecosystem approach to well, it's actually co-management between two entities to manage the marine environment. So I'm bringing this approach into the work I'm supporting in the Moana project. And essentially, a waka taurua, which you can see here, is two separate waka that represent two groups coming together to work together to achieve a common purpose, and having a negotiated space for collaboration within the centre and the fishing net representing what you're trying to achieve. So you can, this was published in Marine Policy, so if you want to know more about taking this approach, you can find it there. And it's also a transdisciplinary research approach which recognises what the key take-homes of a transdisciplinary approach are that you are aiming to solve a problem, a real-world problem, and you do this applying methods from a range of disciplines and knowledge systems. So for us, across mātauranga Māori knowledge system and a range of science disciplines in the first instance. So the key outputs we have in the Whakatohea Rohe Moana case study are to develop a Whakatohea Moana plan and an iwi impact assessment framework with green mussels as a case study. And why is this important? As Danny mentioned, we have an aspiration to be a food basket to the world as Whakatohea. And while we're doing this, we want to ensure that our values and our knowledge, our values are upheld, and that our knowledge is the foundation of what we do. And that we're also making our decisions based on best information from our mātauranga and from science, because we want to thrive in a challenged environment. So you can see here that within the Bay of Plenty, we've been experiencing marine heat wave. So the water temperatures are above the long-term averages. So having the science come together helps us prepare for climate change and those big changes that are happening in our oceans. So our Moana plan the purpose is to describe how we want to care for our moana for our generations to come. And it's named Maruhia Atu. And this is important because Maruhia Atu comes from one of our pātere or chants written by our eponymous ancestress Muriwai. And Maruhia Atu means to shield and to shelter or to protect. So it reflects what we want to achieve for our moana in the future. And the structure of the plan also comes from our pātere, Pākehī kura ki uta kura ki waho. So this is, Pākehī kura is our name for our Opotiki harbour that we're developing. And ki uta and ki waho reflect that it's a plan for the coast and the marine space. And then it's structured using the terms kura, our kaitiaki, who we are and how we will structure ourselves to carry out the plan, and how entities that want to support us with our aspirations can engage with us. Our uara are our values and interests connected to the marine space. Our raruraru are our issues and concerns we have for the marine coastal area that we want to address. And our ahanga are our priorities that we have for working in the marine space. So I've been focusing most recently on condensing down our kōrero that we gathered during our information gathering sessions, our hui, into key ahanga priorities for our moana. And we have 9. We have an overarching priority which focuses on the mauri of our moana. So this is like the life force of our moana and ensuring that it is in a really healthy state. And then all the other priorities support our relationship that we have with the moana. So they're about Māori tangata. So identifying our care for the environment, that we are connected to the moana, that we are able to gather food from our moana in terms of food security, that it's healthy for us and we're able to access it easily. That our tikanga and protocols are exercised when we're utilising the marine space. That our rāhui are understood and supported when they're implemented. So these are our bans on take that we put in place. That we have water safety when we're out in our marine space. That our mātauranga, our knowledge and wisdom are passed on to the next generations and also to other people that are carrying out activities in our marine space. And also whairawa, that we are able to invest in our marine economy as whakatōhea. And we're lucky that Michelle has developed our image here, which represents all of that aspiration for our moana, feeding into the hands of whakatōhea and hopefully flowing out as a healthy moana. So for each of our ahanga priorities, we've identified objectives, responses and actions, measures of success and links to entities that can support us to achieve our plan. And last week we had the Moana Project annual hui, and during the hui we had all of the scientists presenting on their research, and in particular we had a section on the Bay of Plenty, and all the scientists were able to share their information and how it characterizes the mussels and the currents in the Bay of Plenty. So you can see how the currents are flowing, and so this was a great opportunity for us to link those diverse knowledge sets to the Moana plan. So we had a session at the end of the day where we were discussing how all the information connects. And then in the next day, we started Māori model framing for the iwi impact assessment. So we were looking at appropriate measures for our priorities. And the overall aim we have for our Māori model is assess the impacts of ocean dynamics, marine heat waves, and the influence on source sink dynamics and genetic connectivity on mussel farm and wild mussel fisheries, which is really looking at how those key changes in our marine environment are going to have an impact on the mussel farm and then our mussel fisheries on the coast. And so we were brainstorming different indicators that we have for our different priorities to develop Māori points. So you can see here, we've got one for identifying jobs for people. And so this is where the future of the project will carry on for the next year. And it's exciting to be working in this space because we're applying our concepts in managing the marine space. I'd like to thank all the participants, the groups that we have involved in the Moana project. My work's just a tiny, tiny snapshot of everything that's happening within it. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Kia ora, Kimberly. Kia ora, Danny. Thank you for providing that sort of overview of Whakatoa's interest as well as the Moana project. Look, I'm just going to move on to Chris Inslee. Chris Inslee is the CEO of the Te Arawa Fisheries, and he is a key advocate for Te Taumata, which is Māori interest in trade, as well as being the chair of the Te Putai Research Institute Board of Directors. So kia ora, Chris.
Kia ora, and thank you, Mal. And good evening to everybody out there that's listening, wherever you may be. I'm hoping that you, I'm dialing in from a slow mobile phone network, so I'm hoping that this works. I might drop the video as we're going through, but let me just say that my talk today, I'm really going to extend on the discussion from my two cousins, Danny Paruru and Kimberly Maxwell, and Maui, and the work that they've been doing in Te Whakatohea. I, like them, relate through genealogy of Whakapapa to the tribes of the Eastern Bay of Plenty, being Te Whakatohea, Te Whanuapani and Ngāti Porou. So what I'd like to do is sort of walk through in sort of three stages. It's what we've been doing collectively as tribes more widely than just in the East Bay of Plenty, but to build on the work that the Whakatau has been doing in terms of exploring the potential and opportunity for aquaculture to play a role in our development going forward. So it's really broadening up what you've heard from both Danny and Kimberly to the rest of the tribes of the Bay of Plenty region. So, and what I'll do is sort of talk through, I don't have any slides, I don't want to use slides, I'm just going to talk through what our journey looked like, say 2 years ago, what the last 2 years looked like, where we are today, and where we want to get to out there into the future in terms of aquaculture development for the tribes of the Bay of Plenty region as part of our development plans. So 2 years ago, we all got together in a meeting in a place called Whakatane in the Bay of Plenty. And this was all of the leaders of all of the tribes of the Bay of Plenty. And at the outset, we acknowledged that the work of the Whakatohea had been in this game a long time. The rest of the tribes of the Bay of Plenty region hadn't even started. So it was very much learning from the work of the Whakatohea, but also by bringing together all of the other tribes who had similar aspirations, albeit hadn't started. What it did was important in that we've always been very clear that if we really want to play seriously in the space of aquaculture, towards, as both Danny and Kimberly have talked about, having, creating really premium that product, so that product out into valuable markets of the world. One of the fundamentals that we were very tribe on their own couldn't do it.
Chris, you might need to cut your video. It's just sort of breaking up a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Hopefully that makes a bit of a difference. So my point is that we all realized that we all couldn't do it individually, that we all had to band together, and in order that we created scale. Why? Because the capital cost of world-class aquaculture to create premium value product would kill any attempt for individual tribes to do it on their own. So that was really the guiding principle, and it's something that sits very easily and comfortably with us as Māori, because we all relate together. So we all agreed that we would all band together, we would build on the work of the Whakatohea, and reach out around the world. That was our first task, was to reach out around the world. If we're going to do this, let's figure out what's going on in the rest of the world in terms of, one, wild stock fisheries, two, what was the state of aquaculture and technology in the world, and then from that derive what we thought would be the priorities for our tribal effort. So what did we find when we looked out around the world? A bunch of reasons. Kimberly's mentioned one of them, but there were others. So climate change was certainly one big factor that we know is looming. Overfishing, overregulation, losing public confidence or license to operate. These are all factors that we could see wild stock fisheries in the world was declining. And so the other side of it, though, when we looked around the world, we could see that the demand for high value protein was going up. So supply was going down, demand was going up. So it was a no-brainer. The thing that would fill that gap was growing our own supply, i.e. aquaculture. So that's what we learned. The next thing we found was we asked our investigators to fix species that we effectively knew we could grow really well, but there was demand for internationally. And we came up with 5. Actually, we came up with a long list, more than 20, but then we asked our technical people to shortlist that down. And they shortlisted it down to 5. Top of the list, green lip mussels, which is what Whakatohea is doing right now. So we always knew that that was going to be a priority anyway. Second, open ocean, a species called kingfish. It's a pelagic species. So that was that came up second. So that was open ocean. Third, land-based, a variety of seaweed. And fifth, scallops. So from that, so that was our list of priority. From on each of those, and what that economic analysis told us was that at maturity, if we could bring all of those 5 together, building on what Whakatohea has done, it would take, this is my point earlier about scale, it would take about $200 million New Zealand dollars of capital investment to get that kind of development off the ground. Second, at maturity, if we could do this and do this well, it would add to the regional GDP of the Bay of Plenty region about $1.5 billion new GDP per year. And importantly, at maturity, it would create more than 2,000 new jobs for our people. So that's what we learned in the first 2 years. So where are we now? So what we're doing right now is putting together the investment ready information memorandum for each of those 5 species. So this is what we then take out to the investors. Who might the investors be? First and foremost, our own people to invest. And it's a little bit like what Danny's talked about, you know, reaching back to our own people, our tribes, our communities. And we see that as fundamental, that because we will never relinquish anything less than a controlling share. We will hold the controlling share to this. We will not allow that to be diluted away, and we're not interested in anybody that attempts to actually say that, you know, they want the controlling share. Well, that won't happen. So other investors that we're talking to already are these newly emerging impact investors, the ones that care about things like social impact and community development, responsibility for the environment, but as well as growing wealth. Growing wealth is hugely important. If we grow wealth, we can reinvest that back to grow our people. So the impact investors are high on our radar, but so are other people. So we've already got interest from Indigenous peoples, particularly at this stage in North America, both in the US and Canada. We are very, very interested to be engaging with them, and we are. So that's where we are at right now, building information memorandums. We hope to have at least 2 of those done for 2 projects by Christmas of this year, with the objective being in the next 12 to 18 months, we get a couple of projects. And at the moment, the 2 ones that are looming as priorities is land-based reticulated aquaculture technology, kingfish, where we're talking with 2 of our landowning groups in the Bay of Plenty about that being the priority project, and the others will follow beyond that. One last point that I do want to make, and that is, I've always been very clear, like Kimberly and like Danny and like Maui, that we've got to have science sitting right alongside us to help inform all the decisions that we make. So we have formed a consortium led by us of the top science organizations made up of Crown Research Institutes and universities that are sitting with us right now, where we're working on mapping out short, medium, and long term, what are the big issues and what are the big opportunities, and then from that, what are the science priorities. We expect to publish that roadmap probably in the next month or 2, and get that funded by government and others to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That brings the scientists around us as Māori iwi in the Bay of Plenty. Look, I hope that all makes sense. I wish you well for the rest of your discussion. I am going to have to bow out now and leave you in the hands of Maui, Danny, and Kimberly. Okay, Maui?
Kia ora. Kia ora, Chris. Thanks very much for jumping in and sharing that with us. I know you have to go do some other discussions with the trade partners overseas, but thanks for making the time to just highlight the value that you see of science and supporting the aspirations of tribes. So kia ora. We have one more speaker, and that is Chris Battersall, who is a professor at the University of Waikato, who's been working alongside a number of iwi across a variety of projects in the Bay of Plenty. And I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Kia ora Maui, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Chris Battersall tōku ingoa, no Mangere East ahau. My affiliations, I guess my ancestry goes back to Ireland predominantly, but having been brought up in South Auckland for a while there, I consider myself a Palangi Niuean, actually. So I have a mixed ancestry and a mixed affiliation, and I see the world through those sorts of eyes. Anyway, without further ado, I will share my screen. Screen one. Can you see, is that coming out correctly, Maui?
Yep, looks good.
Kia ora. Kia ora also, Maui, for the invitation to come and speak to you today. I'm very humbled by that. And I speak to you on behalf of all of the whānau that I'm privileged to know from Hapu and Iwi throughout Aotearoa. But the talk today, as shown, is about Indigenous-led science collaborations towards a productive ocean, obviously, but I'm going to give a few examples of experiences that we've had collectively in the Moana Toi in the Bay of Plenty. So I'll start off with an event that happened very quickly after I returned to Aotearoa from 12 years in Northern Australia, working up with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities there. And this was, of course, the Rena incident. And from that tragedy, it's galvanized some very long-standing connections amongst ourselves, amongst iwi and hapu, right throughout the Moana Toi. It was a severe incident. It caused an enormous amount of grief, of course, through whānau right throughout the Moana, because of the massive whaling event that happened because of it. What it did immediately, however, is provided an urgency of opportunity to work together. And this was absolutely iwi-led. We created a collective called Te Māori Moana, which was absolutely led by all key hapu and iwi right throughout the bay. And the connections that we were able to create amongst various researchers, various institutes right throughout the country, and including as far away as Germany, University of Bremen, who are here and had a lot of very sophisticated marine surveillance equipment, was linked together, was joined and glued together by mana whenua right throughout the Moana. And everything from the point of its inception, which happened on the day of the Rena grounding in 2011 by the iwi collective. And everything from then fell from Mataranga Māori directed science and discovery. So 15 projects were created throughout the Moana Toi iwi. Had 7 core research partners. Most of the other agencies were involved. And at the same time, because always with hapu and iwi, there is an interest in learning from activity, from action, hands-on action in the sea, on the beaches, in the oil in this case. So a whole bunch of MSc scholars were created and interns, and a whole bunch of students were developed from that. There are a lot of world firsts in this occasion. It was the second most expensive shipwreck in the world, but it was the first ever to have integrated Mataranga Māori leading the research associated with what was happening with the pollution that was being created, and importantly asking the question, what is the big impact on mana whenua, on society in the entire bay, and importantly, how long is it going to take to recover, and can it recover to a pre-Rena condition? Now, of course, there hasn't been, at that time, much directed survey of any of the reef systems in the Moana, but of course there was Mataranga Māori. There was the oral histories, the spoken knowledge that Kaumatua and other members in the tribes throughout the Moana that they had already. And of course, that was then underpinning the ability to identify how the environment was coming back to where it should be. Another world first, and a first in Aotearoa also, was the stated importance of Māori. And this was really significant because, of course, it was coming from the Minister of for the Environment, a Pākehā-led ministry, identifying the importance of Māori. And that, of course, happened because of the voice that was being raised at very, very high levels from mana whenua right throughout the moana. So from the Rena incident, and this is a very quick example of the importance of listening very early to Mataranga on day one, and speaking to kaumātua, Māori fishing officers, it was clear that the oil, should the Rena break up, now mindful, this advice was provided by kaumātua before the Rena even looked as if it was going to crack open and lose oil. At that time, it looked as if she could just back off the reef. And they predicted absolutely accurately where the oil was going to go through Matakana, Mount Maunganui, Omanu, all the way around through to Makatu, and indeed as far east as Whangaparoa and around Kokiri. It was only a week later that was substantiated by some of the Met-Ocean Service and NIWA models. But it provided a week's advance notice to get ready. And indeed, that's what happened. And a good example of iwi, hapu iwi-led science is affected in this slide. This is Ngāti Makino, the Makatu hapu, who didn't wait for anybody to start looking at how to clean up the oil. They turned the tragedy of oil arriving on the Makatu beaches, Nudix Beach, into an opportunity to trial their own method for cleaning up oil. They resisted the desire to use dispersants, and they went instead to sphagnum moss and even manuka to try and clean up the oil. And they did that in a rigorous way, a scientific way, informed by Mataranga, that actually worked. And so they were able to formalize the results of that experiment. They had plots that were left, plots that were cleaned up with traditional techniques. Very, very exciting work. That entire project has, in my opinion, led to the Motiti Natural Environment Management Area. This is where protection has been afforded to a number of the reefs around Motiti Island. Now, the protection afforded and the style in which it's afforded has caused significant controversy, obviously, and that story isn't over yet. However, there was recognition that there was a very special place in the Motiti archipelago, that it was broken, not only because of Rena, but the connections between the reefs, sea life, birds, shoaling fishes appeared to have been broken. And this was based, once again, on calls from hapu and iwi, based on the Mataranga and the knowledge of what the system should be like to what it is now. So there are more negotiations, I am certain, to have a look at how this protected area might be administered, and there's an opportunity here to return it to Māori governance and a system of protection that is based on traditional rahui and taipuri. It's important also to note, and picking up on the Whakatoia story from the last speakers, that this area is really important also as a nursery ground, not only for fishes, but probably also for mussel scat. Here's another example. This is where there is increasing concern by mana whenua on the land to sea connections and the need to restore the health and the viability and the resilience of both systems, because absolutely it is known that the land and the sea are connected. And this has come from a project conceived and led by Ngāti Pukenga in this case. It concerns an area of land which has been returned through settlement that they wish to restore. There's a puna there of significance and also a pā that has been let run into wild gorse that needs to be restored. But there is also a need for the hapu to make a living from this land. And so they are going to look at a novel mechanism for growing kiwi fruit in a more traditional way that doesn't harm the land. Importantly, this hapu is very, very strongly interested in demonstrating that if you heal the land, you can heal the puna and the awa, and you can also then heal the estuary. The Rangatawa estuary drains this area. And we know from previous students' work, Vanessa Taikato, for instance, that the Rangatawa estuary is really suffering from the urbanisation in Tauranga Moana. So it's a project which is deeply concerned with what we are seeing everywhere around this country and sadly around the world, where the land is bleeding its soil into the sea, and they want to stop that. They also want to stop the loss of fertilizers, the loss of pesticides and herbicides into the sea. So they have created an entity which is harnessing a number of hapu and iwi right throughout the moana, ourselves and others, to look not only at mechanisms where the land can be restored, some of it can be made productive, but importantly, most of it will be returned to its natural state. But at the same time, to do that in a way which is advancing really cutting edge science. So rather than relying on glyphosate and tordon, for instance, to treat some of the pest species of plants, they are interested in looking at recent discoveries that have been made of marine bioactives that have herbicide potential, pesticide potential, that can also enhance root strike, that can significantly ward off various diseases. And in amongst this, of course, is Te Arawa fisheries as well, because if you're producing these bioactive extracts from marine sources, we also need to be able to produce them, and aquaculture is obviously the way. So not only are they looking at glyphosate and tordon replacements, but also into the longer term, looking at kauri dieback, phytophthora, and myrtle rust, and other significant biosecurity issues. We already have a lead on a Pseudomonas active, PSA, which affects kiwi fruit. And this is important because, of course, many hapu and iwi right throughout this region own kiwi fruit farms, and they are very strongly interested in only using herbicides and agrochemical amenities that are not going to damage the land and that are not going to seep into catchments and then eventually out to sea. So this is a really exciting project, the concept of which is being led, as I say, by mana whenua. Extending that further, there is also with Te Whana Apanui, all the way from Opotiki right the way out through to Waihao Bay, a very strong collective that are looking at enhanced mana through restoration of kaimoana by cultural management of mataitai. And this is looking at the receiving waters because it is known, and there's great concern, that the land, as I've mentioned before, is bleeding soil, topsoil, mud into the sea. This is happening very frequently, as I say, right throughout Aotearoa globally, but also along that eastern seaboard of the eastern part of the Moana Toi from forestry operations. And so there's known damage already based on mataranga of kahawai, kina, kura, other stocks of kaimoana and taonga species, and they're very strongly interested in restoring that. So this is all about the land-sea connectivity, this time looking from the sea up to the land and coming up with better mechanisms to be able to respond to catchment discharges and heal that system. A further example, which is linked somewhat to the previous ones, is the initiative created by Tauranga Moana, iwi and hapu, in creating the Tauranga Moana Biosecurity Capital. This is the first ever collective to focus on biosecurity, both on land and in the moana, that is created, promulgated, led by iwi, and it has forged a very strong and significant alliance with the Ministry of Primary Industries. It is now going to be mapped into other centres, Taranaki being probably the next one. Launched in 2018, it was a collaboration between Tauranga Moana iwi, local industry, business, science institutes, educators, local and central government. And it's a flagship of Te Katu, this us movement. It's focusing awareness, knowledge and taking action, absolutely cored by Māori participation and collaboration. And it has a common purpose, education, growing awareness of biosecurity so that we can respond. And here we see Kia Maya and amongst the rangatahi and running as she does with Hemi, courses every quarter at Pilot Bay around Mauo, looking at biosecurity issues, teaching teaching young people through to old, engaging the community. It is very, very successful. A further example, and this is in between the land and the sea, is estuary and kaimoana restoration. And once again, we've been enormously fortunate to be invited by Makatu, Hapu and Iwi to help them look at what was going to happen with the rediversion of the Kaituna River back into close to its near original course and substance into the Makatu estuary. Now, once again, this has been promulgated by Hapu and Iwi and Makatu and is drawing enormously on the extensive mataranga that is present there. Reiwi Corbett, the entire community have years and years, centuries of information. So it's an amazing example where a huge amount can be learned of long-term, over 100-year change events where a river has been rediverted in and out of an entire estuary. And it is informing a huge amount on the connections between the land and the sea and productivity of these estuarine systems. Very important. It's linked to a long-standing program which has been headed up here in Tauranga Moana by Kane Taiapa, Rangataia, Rangatangata, and it is around a integrated spatial planning tool that integrates between what's happening on the land and some of the pollution coming from it to what's happening in the sea. And importantly, it links in land use, the economy, and underpins it with cultural values, cultural understanding of the importance of the health of the moana. And it results in a connection, a map of where the carbon, the energy, and the productivity is going, and how that ends up enhancing productivity in the estuary and in the nearshore coastal zone based on what is happening up in the hinterland. So it allows some modelling of if you change land use practices, the city grows more suburbs, or you move to dairying from corn, for instance, you can actually see what is likely to happen down into the estuary and eventually out to the coast. So we're facing a perfect storm, sadly, in this changing climate of ours. More storms, more sediment runoff, enhanced nutrient enrichment, more pollutants going in, ocean acidification, marine invasions, sea level rise and warming seas. It is through Indigenous-led science collaborations that we are able to understand the full impact of these changes, because the corporate memory of modern society is very short. Modern science works on 3 to 6 year blocks. And to remember back even 20 years with scientific data is very difficult, because the data for most of the moana just isn't there. It is Indigenous-led science based on mataranga that will resolve this very serious problem, because it dates back hundreds to thousands of years. So we are enormously fortunate, I think, in this country, in this region in particular, to be able to be invited in to work with Hapu and Iwi to really understand what is going on. And more importantly, given that we're an educational institute primarily, we are interested in following the lead from Hapu and Iwi in making sure that our young and not so young continue to learn, to grow, and become more equipped to deal with the world. So in harnessing the science of Maui, we all learn. And it really is harnessing that haututu within, that cheekiness of curiosity, that we will be able to forge ahead and hopefully make a difference. Kia ora, thank you.
Chris, thanks very much. So those are the 4 speakers that we've had today. And I think, really point strongly towards this session with examples of iwi-led or Indigenous-led projects, but that they definitely see the value and the outcomes from science collaboration. So look, it's just opening the floor now for people to ask questions of any of the presenters, happy for Kimberly and Danny and Chris to keep their cameras on. And if fine, actually, because there's a relatively tight group here, if people want to just have their cameras as well, we can ask questions, have a discussion. So the floor is open. If no one has a question, I've got a few I prepared earlier, but over to you first. Any hands? Okay, so maybe to kick things off, I'll just throw this question to the panel. So why do you think Indigenous communities are looking to take leadership roles in science collaborations?
Okay, shall I? I'll have a go at answering that. I guess from my perspective, working for the iwi is a privilege, but I also think that it's important to have good knowledge systems around you, whether it's drawn from traditional knowledge, drawn over generations from the ancestors that first settled here right till this time, that can provide guidance and decision making for what you do around your sea space is really important. But I guess what you might call Western science practices also can add value to the knowledge systems that we have around us. So the more we know, the better it will be for us, I guess, to make decisions, whether it's customary management or in terms of looking at commercial development for the sea space that we have in front of us. But ultimately, it's about ensuring that we have sustainability for what we have in our oceans. That's my perspective from whakatohea iwi, I guess.
Okay, kia ora. I got my little reminder there. I guess getting a marine science education as a Māori, you're sort of thinking, well, what about all my tauranga that I've grown up with? Where does that fit into this picture? So being able to lead in the space allows for our tauranga to have its rightful place in our better information informed decision making. And it also gives our children a place to grow up where they know that the tauranga they have grown up with and learnt has value, and it's not lost in the system, and we're able to guide people to their understanding that there are more ways of viewing the world, more ways of addressing issues that we have, as Chris has shared. And not only can our tauranga inform our goals, but also the goals that non-Māori have can also benefit from knowing tauranga. So in our science hui last week, there was a really exciting guest speaker we had, who's this Peter Vitasevich, the CEO of our Whakatohea Mussels company, and he said it has been amazing to have such a close collaboration with the science community, so that there's that direct link between science and iwi and our aspirations. So it just closes that gap and means that the science can inform what we're doing. For example, how long is the storm season going to be? So then you don't reseed your lines, and then for it to be Indigenous led, then we also can exercise our rangatiratanga and have our tikanga, our protocols as the baseline of the relationship. Yeah. This is Hanimana, youngest youngest audience member.
I'm being funny. Yeah.
Make you want to have another one. If I can add, I think part of it too is that Hapuniwi want and should have a longevity and consistency of interaction. And much of the science driven today is really short term. The Torres Strait Islanders have a term for scientists, and they call them seagulls. They fly in, leave a small deposit, and then fly out again. And really, you know, we need to turn that around. And I think the funding system is trying to do that, but I don't know if it's quite achieved that yet.
Kia ora. Okay, I'm just saying, looking around, no one's got their hands up yet. Okay, so I just want to sort of pick up on the point that you mentioned, Kimberly, around traditional knowledge and or Mātauranga Māori, and just that it also finds a place within these sorts of science collaboration. So how do you see the traditional knowledge adding value into a science context? This is sort of generally for the panel.
Cool. I just wanted to add, I guess, to connected to the other question, but a lot of the knowledge that we've collected, written down around the ocean, you know, our people had locations for cultural fishing grounds or historic fishing grounds where they gathered knowledge around, you know, what fish you could find in certain locations, what time of the year you would catch them, what type of ground it was, perhaps if it was sand or mud or rock. And to me, that type of knowledge is a science of its, you know, in a different way. So we use this term now, I guess, as traditional knowledge or mātauranga, but it was a science that our ancestors were practicing to, you know, better provide for their families. So we're utilizing this information to help understand the location of different fish across the ocean within our water space. And for us, it's also about looking at how do we protect those areas for future sustainability. And interestingly, where we have the mussel farm, there are 3 traditional fishing grounds in those areas. And since the mussel farm's been there, there's been a massive increase in the different fish populations that we have there, such as hapuka, which is a massive fish, you know, that's normally caught in quite deep water. But there are some hapuka grounds there and other types of fish that we hadn't seen for a long time until the mussel farm was established in this particular area. So, you know, the traditions that we had there, the knowledge that we had around those fishing grounds has been really important for us. So, yeah, I just wanted to add a little piece around, you know, Mātauranga Māori.
I guess in the Moana project, I want to use Chris's example of seagulls. I guess if you go and you're looking for a mussel bed and you've never been to a place before, you've got to go to the local seagulls to work out where the mussels are. Otherwise, you know, it's a big blank canvas looking at the sea. So within the Moana project, we're fortunate enough to have a dedicated team working with, well, led by Danny, working with the tangata whenua to coordinate the mussel sampling program so that we could understand where the mussel beds were. And it's impossible to understand how the mussels are genetically connected around the bay without knowing where the mussels are first. So it's just one example within the project of, yeah, how our mātauranga informs mussel sampling planning, for example.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, through my rather new and naive exposure to maramatanga, that is, I've been recently exposed to that by Reiwi Corbett, and also through my wife here, working on massive data sets based on maramatanga, and it's the science and depth of understanding of the natural world and how it connects to the physical environment is just unbelievable. It is huge. It transcends the biophysical environment in a very, very sophisticated way. And to me, you know, I think a lot of traditional scientists, and by that I mean modern ones, Western science as they call it, have no idea about the complexity of some of the systems of understanding that are there, and can be learned from.
Nice. So I'm still trying to leave some space if participants want to ask questions. There's an opportunity here. So I guess the sort of next question that I've been thinking about too is sort of what lessons would you share with people about how to either I guess from a community point of view lead Indigenous-led science collaborations, or from a science view sort of foster Indigenous leadership within science collaborations?
Again, I can only speak from my experience working with you know, a huge amount of researchers across Aotearoa with regards to the water space that we have here in the Bay of Plenty. And of course, our interests have been in relation to, first and foremost, the mussel farm development, but then also looking at other potential species that could be grown here in our water space. And then the other element for us is yeah, the customary cultural elements that are really important as well. So first for us, I think, it was to find you know, the people who have the knowledge across different universities across New Zealand that could actually provide different levels of information to us. So I think for me, the Moana project that we've been involved with over the past 3 or 4 years has really opened up the opportunities to engage from an iwi perspective with those different skilled science researchers who are all providing a lot of different knowledge systems to us. So I think for tribes, we need to be open to collaboration at many different levels to ensure that we're collecting as much information as possible to make really good decisions about what we do in our water space. But also we need to ensure that as knowledge holders in our own right, that we can also give feedback to manage the resources that we have in our water space. That's probably just my opinion in that, to answer your question.
Sure.
If I can make a comment based on quite recent experience, to be able to carry out mātauranga-led science and research, of course, requires funding. All too often, it's assumed that marae, iwi and hapu whānau will somehow miraculously fund this themselves. And in the process, their lives and time are just torn apart. And so to come up from an individual hapu or whānau, as is frequently needed, and I'm thinking about a recent situation out in the east, Te Whānau Apanui tribe out at Raukokori, they felt they just didn't have the wherewithal to be able to compete in a funding system like MB or Vision Mātauranga. And the answer was for them to reach out to people like yourselves, Maui, Danny and Kimberly in particular, people like Kane Taipa who have been quite successful in those systems, to just start. And in our experience, once that happens, very, very quickly they took over, because suddenly they saw, oh, that's what you got to do. Oh, that's actually pretty easy. And then off they went, and they've been quite successful. So it's just reaching out in the first instance for people who've been successful, I think, to start. And that way they end up being the host of the funding rather than getting it from other parties, which is really important for mana. And the other thing, of course, is to align with people, irrespective of what they're doing, who have an empathy for really the drive for Mataranga-led, iwi-led projects and initiatives.
Yeah, it's a shame Chris isn't here to speak on this, because in learning about the Smart Aquaculture project and how it's very iwi-led, even to the point of developing memorandums of understanding with different science research organisations, it's very clear that we're shifting away nationally from a system where scientists connect with communities, to communities driving the research. So at the large research funding level, we have projects with Kāhui Māori, so they have a very important role in determining what projects are supported through the large funding. Particularly in the marine space, we have a couple of projects, large national projects that are supporting amazing iwi Indigenous led research. And yeah, it's sort of, I think we're in the stepping stones. We're not at the top of the platform, but I feel like, yeah, the model that the Smart Aquaculture project presents is a very, very clear iwi-led initiative, or pan-iwi actually led initiative. And Whakatōhea have as well searched and found the researchers that suit or have the capability to address and answer the questions that Whakatōhea have in terms of their aspirations. As a researcher, sometimes I've had people ask for my support, but I've really felt that, oh, the skills they need aren't the skills I have, but try to put them in contact with people who can better address their concerns, particularly around genetics and understanding different populations on that level. That's it. You know, marine science is huge, and I think I've really diversified, and having people that can make those connections and facilitate those relationships is just as important as just not being Indigenous led, but as a part of that leadership is having those connectors in between the two communities.
Kia ora. Well, kia ora. Look, so we're coming up to the finishing point. I just want to make a couple of comments. I've been fortunate to be either involved or around a number of the projects that have been talked about, and I think it's really interesting to sit here and hear the story and the reflection on it over the past few years. I think I was seen as Kimberly and Danny and Chris were alluding to, this sort of transition towards more iwi-led science collaborations. And there's a lot of value in it, both in terms of, for the communities themselves, seeing the value of science and the way that it can be used to generate data that supports them realizing their aspirations. And I think as iwi become more focused on meeting their priorities, whether they were environmental ones or commercial ones, and start to, and they have the expertise I think, and leadership, both cultural business from a business point of view and technical, to drive those projects, you end up in a situation where that starts to happen. Then seeing this shift where there's a greater appreciation of the value of traditional knowledge, and people can see past it just as a story of something that happened in the past, to understanding some of the underpinning logic that sits around and can inform the way we think about decisions and how we understand the environment. I think there's been a shift, and I think this was evident actually across the 3 examples of things moving away from projects into programs of work. And that can only come about by the building of relationships between the scientists and the communities. And that increases and supports the building of not only relationships, but also networks and capacity. And that capacity starts to grow and drive both the networks, but also the different opportunities that take place. So I just want to take this chance to thank the speakers for giving up their time at this early stage in the morning. You know, I think the examples were great, and while they're focused on a particular area within Aotearoa New Zealand, there's things in there that will be relevant to communities around the world. And just to finish off, as we started off with a karakia or a prayer, just in closing, pakere ake te kōrero ki te pautuorongo, hei tiki anō mō muri ake nei, kia wāte ai, kia tina, haumia, huia, tae ki.